With the extra attention that we seem to be getting in the media of the last few days, has come some conspiracy theories. These have been doing the rounds for a little while, but there's been an awful lot of media attention upon us, and certainly some of the media seem to be coming round to our way of thinking. A lot of them, if you'd watch the Sunday supplement, if you'd listen to a couple of the bits and pieces on BT Sport over the weekend, you would appreciate that a few of the pundits are now starting to appreciate that the club is not very well run. One of the conspiracy theories that I've heard is that somehow the owners want us to get relegated. It's somehow advantageous financially for them, for us to get into trouble and to go down. Apparently, if we then go down, the stadium is then in a weaker position. We can then take over the stadium. We then become more acceptable and more attractive to any potential takeover. Whilst I understand the conspiracy theory, I don't believe it. I totally discount it. It's very, very complicated. The value of any football club is going to be significantly more if they're in the top division. I mean, you've only got to be in the Premier League for 1 year and you're guaranteed pretty much a year's money at 100. What was that turnover last year? 190 million. Even if we went down, we get 3 years parachute money. So, I mean, you're guaranteed by being in the Premier League for one season, you're guaranteed well over 300 million. Clearly, that is going to be more than just having a club that's gone down and be able to build up from there. What I think is probably the truth is that they're just not very good at running a football club. I think their judgment is just quite poor. I think they want to keep us up. I think they want us to stay up. I'm pretty sure they want the best price possible for the club when that offer comes in. I think the mind is willing. They just don't know how to do it. You look back at their history with Birmingham. When they took over at Birmingham, they got relegated straight away. During their time at Birmingham, they would then get promoted. They would then get relegated again. They then get promoted again. They then get relegated again. Basically, they suffered 3 relegations at Birmingham. They got into all sorts of trouble there. There were massive protests from the Birmingham fans. They wanted them out. What did David Sullivan actually say at one point? He said, I think deep down the Birmingham public have had enough of us. They think we should have mortgaged their houses to buy more players and compete with Chelsea and Arsenal. The honeymoon is over and we're at the divorce stage now, unfortunately. I also feel we've had no support from Birmingham Council. Birmingham Council was a reference to the fact that I think basically Golden Sullivan wanted the council to help pay for St Andrews or to give them a replacement ground so as they could sell off St Andrews. Something like that. I may be sketchy on the fine detail, but they certainly wanted the council to help them out with the stadium, which of course sounds familiar. The point of the matter is, rather than, again, being too conspiratorial about that detail, is they got relegated 3 times. They weren't very good at Birmingham. In fact, the moment that they left Birmingham, Birmingham won the League Cup. They won a trophy. Now, obviously the story goes on to say that they actually sold Birmingham to somebody who was to get imprisoned. For fraud, I think it was possibly for fraud. And the club was in many respects sold down the river. But my point is, you wouldn't look at that and say that was a successful stewardship of a football club. You wouldn't look at that and say, as chairman of Birmingham City, they were a success. How could they be? They were up and down. They suffered numerous relegations. Of course, they came to West Ham. And then almost immediately, we suffered a relegation. It was quite clear it was going to happen, if you remember, with Avram Grant. He should have been sacked. When Avram Grant, I remember, was playing Demba Ba on the wing. You think, what are you doing, mate? Play him up front. Surely it was clear. They dillied, they dallied, they dithered. We went down. We came up, of course, straight away. But again, when you look at their history at Birmingham, you look at what happened at West Ham, not hugely successful. So taking aside the stadium move, the change of badge, the promises, all of that sort of thing, the fact that we now find ourselves in a situation where we may be looking at relegation is not wholly surprising. But it does show, I think it shows 2 things. Number one, it shows an inability to follow the trends of football. Because football has changed since they were in charge at Birmingham City. In charge at Birmingham City, they had a manager called Trevor Francis. Trevor Francis was would have been not quite omnipotent, but Trevor Francis would have had his hands all over the football club and would have been involved in scouting, coaching, lots of different things. The manager, back in the days, used to do a lot more than the managers do now. Now so much of it is delegated, or so it should be. A head of recruitment, a director of football, a head of scouting, a scouting division, analytics division, physios, medics. It's a whole team of people with lots of different departments, and each department has a head. That's how modern football is run. Without labouring the point I've mentioned in previous videos, it's clear that West Ham don't do that. So have they followed the trend? No, they haven't. But also I think the fact is, it questions whether or not they're able to learn from their mistakes. The fact that we're now back in relegation territory suggests they didn't learn from their mistakes at relegation at Birmingham. Suggests they didn't learn from the first time, that they possibly can't even recognise. It was quite clear that we were in trouble in November, by the way. But it takes a while to recognise. They're quite slow to react. And it made me think about their other business. Because their other business was in the pornography industry, as you will well know. It's quite a bizarre term in these videos to start talking about porn. But I do think it's pertinent to the argument. See, the pornography industry has thrived. I mean, it is massive now. To take you back, when they started in the 70s, when Gold and Sullivan started, they did magazines, they did films, and I think at one point David Sullivan himself was probably responsible for about half the pornography in this country. They were big players in this. But back in the 70s, your pornography, as I say, sounds bizarre, talking about this, but it's important to know. Follow me if you would be so kind. Your pornography was a magazine, or there would be adult cinemas. You would go to the cinema. That's how you got your stuff. All right. If what you want a bit of porn, you either have a magazine or you go to the adult cinema. So we move forward and we get into the 80s, the late 80s, and things start to appear on videotape, on VHS or Betamax, if you remember that. So pornography starts to get distributed within that. There's a shift, there's a change in emphasis. Basically, the industry is changing. You might start to follow what I'm saying here. And just before all that happens, it was quite clear that that was the way it was going to go. They stuck with it, and they went with that, and actually Gold and Sullivan were to go on and make some films. Not themselves, I don't think they actually appeared in it. Thank God. And I've actually, believe it or not, right in front of me, I've got the names of the films. I won't read them out. You can insert your own jokes down below, please, by all means. But anyway, so they're heavily involved. Then we get to the point where the internet comes in. And at that point, it is quite clear that not only is everybody going to be able to, I say digest for want of a better word, consume, let's say, their pornography in a very, very different way. There is actually a distribution which can get your pornography anywhere around the world in an instant. It was quite clear when it started up that the internet was a bit sketchy, but clearly broadband and all these things were coming. At that very point, where pornography went from an industry that was worth tens of millions, at that very time when it went from the tens of millions industry to being worth billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions, that is the exact point when they got out of it. Now, you don't have to know anything about pornography. You don't have to know anything about it at all. You don't have to like it. But the very point that was when they chose to get out, I find that quite weird. They didn't start building websites. They didn't start distributing. They didn't start making their own films and then start distributing. Right? They didn't build YouPorn or Pornhub or on any of that stuff. At that point, they got out. And I tell you what, if that doesn't show, well, you know what I'm trying to say here. The lack of foresight, a lack of business acumen, a lack of noticing when an industry trend is changing. I don't know what does. In fact, I don't think historically you could pick a worse time to get out of an industry than that one. Now, how much relevance does that hold to West Ham? I don't know. Maybe lots, maybe nothing at all. But I think it does bring into question their business judgment. And look, David Gold's worth £500 million. David Sullivan is worth over £1 billion. I don't think it's happened by accident. And I think they've done well to get where they are. But they should probably both be worth about £10 billion, is really my point. And my point is, I'm not entirely sure they know any more about running a football club than they did about the best time to stay and be engaged in the business that they used to be involved in.